Welcome into Bears Weekly, a Chicago Bears network production. Download the Chicago Bears official app, brought to you by Verizon, to follow the team on the go. Bears Weekly is brought to you by Advocate Healthcare, Athletico Physical Therapy, Bet Rivers, CDW, Connie's Pizza, IGS Energy, and Miller Lite. Here are your hosts, Jeff Joniak, a.k.a. the Mayor of Bearsville, and his sidekick, Tom the Surfmaster Thayer.
NFL writers and analysts feel the NFC North is arguably, potentially, the most competitive and challenging division in the NFL here in 2024. Is it true? Will it prove to be true? We dig into that conversation tonight on Bears Weekly here on ESPN 1000 and the Chicago Bears Radio Network with Super Bowl winning Bears guard Tom Thayer. I'm Jeff Joniak, and from SiriusXM NFL Radio's Moving the Chains, we have former Bears quarterback Jim Miller. Thanks to our producers Dan Barilli and Jordan Tredup, and in the ESPN studios tonight, Kendra Smith. The executive producer of the Bears Radio Network is Eric Ostrowski. Coming up, we visit with Vikings radio analyst Pete Bercich, Lions play-by-play man Dan Miller, and the voice of the Packers, Wayne Larrivee. Fellas, good to talk to you. Rookies report next week to Dallas. Vets come in. Training camp begins. We are on, Tom. It is time to go.
Yeah, so do we visit the topic of contracts yet, or do we wait till next week when we see all these guys walk in the building with the Hard Knocks cameras rolling?
Yeah.
So I think it is something that you can't ignore, but you hope in the modern day of the collective bargaining agreement, they can come to a contract resolution. And, Jeff, day one, everybody is on board and ready to go.
Jim, obviously they're talking about the Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze contracts still yet unsigned. What are your thoughts at this point?
Yeah, I think, you got the, two of the top 10. And obviously when you look at Caleb Williams, his was an unusual situation in how he was drafted and how he was interviewed and all that. And so I would think his contract's going to be different. He's going to have certain demands that he wants. But I think we know from the rookie pay scale that's pretty much slotted and slated. So if they do get a little bit more, it's not going to be out of the realm of what pick overall number 1 had last year plus inflation and pick number 9 overall last year plus inflation. That's how these contracts will be reflected.
Jim, in terms of that, what is the and J.J. McCarthy is also unsigned in Minnesota. What are they looking for? They're the Vikings, Dallas Turner also unsigned. There's several in the first round. What are the little nuggets that agents and teams have to negotiate that kind of sneak in?
I think for quarterbacks it's different. You go back to even when Brady Quinn, I think, was taken 22 overall by Cleveland, and he held out. He held out because he felt he was a quarterback, and quarterbacks make premium money, that he could have got more money. And that could be the case for, Caleb Williams right now. He's the number 1 overall pick. The guaranteed money, what's it going to be? Plus, there's probably going to be some incentives in there as well. And I would assume Rome Odunze is thinking the same thing. He's brought in to be a major key weapon of the future, and his is probably going to be incentive-based as well.
Tom, the good news is the salary cap and the discussions over the years have eliminated long-term holdouts, and I think that's very important, not only for the player itself, the rookie, but for the team and how they can set course right out of the gate and not have that distraction. It hasn't been a big topic of conversation in recent years, and I felt it was an important thing because so much time and effort and energy was spent on a first pick negotiating and an agent holding out for the absolute best possible deal that those distractions dominated the start of training camp. We rarely have those anymore.
Yeah, that's why I kind of hope Caleb Williams signs before Rome Odunze, because I think Caleb Williams can kind of set the bar of exactly what is the maximum you're going to make and what is the trickle-down effect after that. Because if you go and you have Rome Odunze sign first, then the first pick in the draft is still an unpredictable amount. So I think if you can get those top couple guys signed, then you're going to start understanding how that money's going to flow downhill.
Jim, what are you going to be looking for? You're coming up to camp, I think, the weekend after, and we'll sit down with SiriusXM NFL Radio, and that's always a good time at Hallis Hall. So what will you be looking for? Where are your eyes going to take you to the field when you arrive?
Well, I think for the Bears, where there's really competitive action, I would think at the center position, with Shelton, with Bates, how's that competition going to work out? Certainly the young quarterback, going to be studying him, his mannerisms. Is he mixing up his snap count? How is his mechanics, the timing of delivery? Because I think we know sacks have been a problem in the past. Is he in a good rhythm throwing the ball? And then just the overall talent that's drafted. The growth of Jaron Dexter. Because he's going to be a key component on the defensive side of the ball. And I think for all those guys, the second-year players and just how much they've grown.
Tom, what are you going to be looking at?
I'm going to see how Kevin Byard fits into the secondary. It's going to be interesting to see. I'm going to see if Nate Davis is on the field participating in his position and that he will hopefully be at day in and day out. Kind of looking where Braxton Jones and Tevin Jenkins are, and Jim talked about the center battle. But, I was looking up this morning, and I know it's a topic I'm always interested in, is in first downs. So what type of offense is Shane Waldron developing in the passing game? Is it the big play strike ability with Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, and DJ Moore? Or is it first down opportunities with DeAndre Swift, Cole Kmet, Gerald Everett, and the receivers? Because when you go and you look at the numbers, I think the Bears were fourth in the division in first downs, and they were number one in the division in first downs given up. And to me, I know I kind of dwell on that, but when you look at the overall performance, especially with a young quarterback, and like Jim says, getting the ball out of his hands, I'm interested to see where that's going.
Yep, first downs lead to touchdowns, Jim. And if this goes the way I envision, or at least I hope I envision, he's going to have opportunities with open receivers. There's going to be somebody open. Just find your completion, protection holds, get rid of the football. And as the season goes on, or as a game goes on, the flair that Caleb Williams is entering the NFL with, what he did in college, that instinctiveness, that spatial awareness in the pocket, his ability to operate within and around the pocket is going to come to fruition when a big play is needed in the clutch.
Yeah, and hopefully Bears fans give him time to develop. There's going to be some growing pains. I think Bears fans, kind of got a little unrealistic, thinking last year was probably going to be a Super Bowl year. There were some that even had, Justin Fields listed as the league MVP. And look at where we are now. So just give young Caleb Williams the time to develop. He's got all the pieces around him. And I'm with you, Jeff. If he just goes through his reads, even if he doesn't know the coverage, he'll get to the right guy. And so he's got to keep his cool about him and understand he's going to make mistakes as well.
So in the intro, Tommy, I said, a lot of people in the league think this is now the toughest division. And toughest doesn't always mean the best, but toughest division. I'll go to war with that, with these four teams, remade in different ways over the course of time, in short periods or long stretches. So do you agree with that assertion, or were you looking at things, and Jim can follow?
Toughest, most competitive, yeah, it may be. Toughest in terms of physical stature of these football teams, I think it goes along with the Steelers and the Ravens and Cincinnati and Cleveland. I think it's going to be a super competitive division. And I think the Bears, when they can climb over Detroit and they can climb over Green Bay, then that's going to give them the opportunity of the hope that we're all talking about here in the early portion of the show.
Yeah, and I think to me it's the second toughest division in football. I'm with Tom. I think the AFC North is just a bloodbath. You look at the quarterback play, you got the league MVP there. Now Russell Wilson's in there. You look at Joe Burrow, and we'll see where it goes with Deshaun Watson. But I think for the NFC North, how these rosters are built, and granted, a lot is going to be determined by the young quarterbacks, whether it's J.J. McCarthy or Caleb Williams. But this is a tough, bruising division. And I think much like last year, it'll come down to potentially the last week of the season, and so did the AFC North.
All right, we've hit the first milepost, and coming up next, we hear the Vikings talk from Pete Bercich, Chicago area man and the analyst for the Vikings on radio, as we get you set for NFC North football here in 2024. This is ESPN Chicago and the Bears Radio Network.
This is Bears Weekly with the voice of the Bears for 23 years, Jeff Joniak, on the Bears Radio Network.
This segment of Bears Weekly is brought to you by IGS Energy. Tom Thayer, Jeff Joniak, and Jim Miller from SiriusXM NFL Radio. Now look at the Vikings as we break down the 2024 NFC North and what many, Pete, is being described as one of the best, if not the best, or the toughest. We've had our opinions on that. Where are you sitting as the analyst of the Minnesota Vikings, Chicago area man, and certainly excited to get this season going? It's going to be fun, Pete.
Yeah, it is. And, you have two teams from the division who The Lions, I hate to say that they disappointed. I mean, obviously they had a good football team, and then the run the Packers had at the end of the year, that's the NFL, right? You carry that success over to the following year. And then there's Chicago, who obviously through the draft has made some improvements. And I'd like to think the Minnesota Vikings have done so as well. So this time of year, everyone thinks they're getting better. And, when you have two teams out of one division winning games in the playoffs, it's going to be a tough road this year for all teams in this division.
Hey, Pete, when you look at the history of the running back position with the Minnesota Vikings, before you got there and since you've been there and beyond, when you think of what they're going to have this year in Aaron Jones, to me, he's been one of the best running backs in the division for quite a while. What is Minnesota's expectations, especially when you're breaking in a new quarterback?
He's the running game obviously helps a younger quarterback. And, Tom, this team, if there's been areas where this team has been deficient since Kevin O'Connell has been here, short yardage, and third down and 1, fourth down and 1, and goal line as well. And short yardage, a tight goal line, tight red zone. And that's where I think Aaron Jones can help the most. And so we're not asking for a ton here, but if he's able to convert some of these third and shorts, able to push, be able to let the Vikings just run the football from the deep red zone, that's going to make a huge difference. And so we're not asking for much. What my thing is what's the identity of this running game going to be? Last year with Alexander Madison, we started running some more counters and some of those other things. From what I've seen out of Jones, he's a zone guy. He's a long cutback kind of guy. He has great vision. He can set up blocks. Will the Vikings have, that type of a running game? I think from schematic standpoint, our running game's in flux. So I'm really looking forward to. That's going to be one of my preseason things is just what's our running game going to look like? What's our identity going to be with the running game? And they're going to have to build it around Aaron Jones. But I guarantee you if he can help us in those short yardage situations. I mean, we lost a game to Cincinnati last year where it was third and run, quarterback sneak. Then they tried it again on 4th and 1. We didn't make it, turn it over. And then, the Bengals go down and score a touchdown right soon after that. So these situations have come back. Turnovers did in the beginning of the year. And then, that short yardage running game needs to improve. And so Aaron Jones is going to be a big part of that.
Pete, Jim Miller here, and good to talk to you. Hope your summer's going well. I just want to know how patient can the Minnesota fan base be? If Sam, let's face it, Sam Darnold, this could be his last shot to be a starter. And if it doesn't work out, they're going to turn to J.J. McCarthy. And I only bring that up because Bears fans, they threw Mitch Trubisky in there way too early, and they threw Justin Fields in there way too early. How patient can they be?
As fans go, it all depends on the record. If we're winning football games, I think they're going to be pretty patient. If not, they're going to want to move on to the future as soon as possible. I think for McCarthy, and for Darnold, what the advantage they have is Kevin O'Connell and the fact that he played the quarterback position in college. He played it in the NFL. He coached that position. He was a coordinator. Now he's a head coach. So he knows that position. I think the hard part for fans is we're not going to know the progress of J.J. McCarthy, right? Because we're not going to see him on the field. So as Darnold could get out there and look okay or not look great, but if McCarthy is behind or they're not going to come out and say this. They're not going to say, hey, it's taking McCarthy a little bit longer to pick things up. We're not comfortable putting them in yet. They're not going to say that. They're just going to stick with Darnold, right? That's the part that is frustrating and that fans have to keep in mind is you have to have, we know he's the future. He's a top 15 pick in the NFL. He's going to be the quarterback. You just got to have patience and have trust that the powers that be are going to put him in when he's ready and when it's best for him. For a lot of fans, that's good. That's today, right? For a lot of fans, they want to see him stay. You drafted him, might as well just throw him in there. But you guys have seen, I think, the other side of that coin by what can happen if you put guys in too soon and they're not ready.
Pete Bercich, radio analyst for the Minnesota Vikings, our guest here on Bears Weekly on ESPN 1000 of the Bears Radio Network. Let's look at your defense. No more Danielle Hunter wreaking havoc on the Bears, though they meet him in Week 2 against Houston again. What's that pass rush looking like, and how do you feel it stacks up in the division in terms of pass rushes?
It's gonna, it was good last year. We got a lot of productivity out of our outside linebackers. Jonathan Grenard, they're gonna have to replicate that, right? Van Ginkel, we'll see how he's gonna be health-wise going into the season. But the more those five guys up front can rush, the better off that we're gonna be. Now, Dallas Turner, they're gonna throw him in there right away. We're gonna see what he's all about. These guys, though, have more position flexibility. They're true outside linebackers. So I think that's going to change the Flores defense a little bit. It's going to be a little bit easier to put certain guys in coverages. You didn't want to put Daniil Hunter in coverage, right? Every once in a while, he'd drop out and kind of take up space. You have guys at the outside linebacker position now that can do that, that can cover. So it's going to give Flores, I think, a little bit more flexibility with the guys that he has. But we're going to need to get after the quarterback. I don't think that's going to be as much of a challenge as just being physical and holding up to the run, right? We've gained a lot of speed, but we've lost a lot of size, right? Daniil Hunter, you have a big body out there, and he was key for us, especially against Atlanta on some goal line plays. So will those guys be able to hold up physically and hold up against the run? But we'll see.
Pete, I think our division has the best tight ends in the league when you look at every team. So I know there's a little bit of an injury setback to the tight end up in Minnesota. Yep. What's the status? And if TJ is not on board immediately, what is the tight end situation with you guys?
Well, I think they're still trying. They're still trying to figure that out. You know what I mean? And for Hawkinson, they're not gonna rush him back, but we need him as quickly as possible. And Tom, you bring up a good point, because there's still a lot of question marks as to who our number 3 wide receiver is going to be. And then, so you kind of have that number 3, number 4 wide receiver, tight end. What personnel group are you going to use? It'll be interesting. I don't have all the names, right off the top of my head, but that's it's going to be a key spot, and one that we're going to have to keep a close eye on in the preseason.
Final one for me, Pete, is you've talked about running the ball 3 or 4 times. Finally get back Dalton Reisner at the guard spot, and basically the line's intact. And I guess your thoughts on Aaron Jones, because we were sold a bad bill of goods last year about Alexander Madison, and he's a 3-down back. And I thought they never should have got rid of Delvin Cook, but just the infusion of Aaron Jones.
Yeah, well, Again, I think the main thing is going to be that short yardage thing. Getting Dalton Reisner's back, was important. Between he and Ed Ingram, we got some guys they struggle at times in pass protection, but what they will do is hit somebody. And we tried this with Madison a little bit more toward the end of the season, especially when Ty Chandler played a lot. Ty Chandler, North Carolina, ran a lot of counter and power, so we started pulling guards. And Reisner's going to hit somebody. Ingram's is they're aggressive. They'll hit somebody. So that counter power running game crept in a little bit more toward the end. Again, that's why I go back to identity. But Reisner is definitely a leader. He's definitely aggressive. He's he's like Thayer. He's a guard. He's this guy that you want. That's just going to grind things out, be nasty, and do what the absolutely has to be done in order to win. But bringing that group together and again, figuring out what is it that we're going to do in the running game, and what are we going to make teams stop? You mentioned Dalvin Cook. What Dalvin Cook brought was explosiveness. We saw it against Buffalo a couple years ago, 70-yard touchdowns. It changes a defense's attitude when, if you hand the ball off, that could be, if they're going to move the chains, it's like, okay, first down on the run, we can survive. But when you have a guy that can break a 50, 60, 70-yard and start scoring touchdowns, then the defense has to schematically respect the running back. And we haven't seen that we didn't see that at all last year. But you're right, our running game was disappointing, especially in key moments.
All right, last one for Pete Bercich. What's your view of the Bears as you sit over there in Minnesota?
I'm excited to see the changes. Chicago is a very difficult place to win, right? It's different in that respect. It's outdoors, it's on grass. Yeah, you have that in Green Bay, but we've had more success in Green Bay over the last couple of years, at least the last 2 seasons, I think, than we've had in Chicago. So, I think for you guys, it's just, can you develop the quarterback in time, and what's that offensive line going to look like? I think defensively, you're going to be, your 4-man front, which is kind of an oddity. Nowadays those guys move, really well. I know our front has had a lot of trouble blocking that defensive front. Very aggressive, and it's just going to come down as, can you guys sustain drives on offense? Can you, move the ball on the ground and run it? And then Caleb Williams, is he going to be able to, just make defenses keep guys back in coverage in the wide receiver position? You guys have, every one of these positions I brought up, you guys have brought in big names. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can tie all that together. Again, Bears are going to be better than they were a year ago. No question about that.
All right, Pete, appreciate the time, buddy. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your days before camp.
You too.
Thanks, Pete.
All right, we'll continue our discussion on the NFC North and the Bears training camp after this break on Bears Weekly on ESPN 1000 and the Bears Radio Network.
This is Bears Weekly with the voice of the Bears for 23 years, Jeff Joniak, on the Bears Radio Network.
This segment of Bears Weekly is brought to you by Athletico Physical Therapy. Visit athletico.com to request an in-clinic or virtual appointment and start feeling better tomorrow. Jeff and Tom and Jim Miller with Wayne Larrivee, the voice of the Green Bay Packers, joining us in our NFC North preview segment. We already heard from Pete Bercich, Wayne, about the Vikings and Brian Flores. What is paramount right now with the Green Bay Packers as you head into your training camp?
I think, Jeff, it's just the step that second-year and third-year players are going to take on this team, especially skill position players. The other factor is the defense. It's new. It's different. A lot of the same faces you're familiar with will be playing, but in a different formation and in a different defense under new defense coordinator Jeff Hafley.
Wayne, it seems like you got to take the best pieces and put them in the perfect place. To me, I think Kenny Clark is one of the best defensive players in the division. Is this a style of defense that will allow him to be the player that he's been, against the Bears and all other teams? Or are they going to try to devise a scheme that fits the back half of the defense to protect inside this division?
Well, I think Kenny has mentioned, at least during the OTAs and minicamp, that he's really excited to play this defense. So I assume it's going to be something that allows him, as he said, to kind of get upfield. They're going to play the run on way to rushing the passer up front of this defense. Right. That's their philosophy. And Kenny, I think, will be freed up a little bit more in this defense. It's going to be interesting to see, really, because, you do have a nose tackle type in T.J. Slayton. You have a interior pass rusher in Devontae Wyatt, and then you have Kenny Clark, who can kind of do both things. It'll be interesting to see how that mix works. I don't think we're going to see that until we get to training camp. I know they did a lot of experimenting, moving people around, that kind of thing during OTAs and minicamp. I'm anxious to see when the pads come on, when training camp really begins, as to what they do. Now, the back end of the defense, I thought, got tremendously better when they signed Xavier McKinney. That was a big one. And then when they drafted Javon Bullard. Bullard's a rookie. He didn't start in their alignments during OTAs and minicamp. It'll be interesting to see how quickly he's in that lineup, though, once we get to training camp. But I think from a safety standpoint, they're going to be better in the middle of the field, downfield. And I think that's really important. Up front, they feel like they have the horses to convert to this 4-3 base.
Wayne, Jim Miller here. Always good to talk to you. And really, I want to focus on the quarterbacks because Matt LaFleur, you think about when Aaron Rodgers was there, it was big that he wanted to be able to audible plays, so they were kind of butting heads a little bit. And now Matt LaFleur with these young quarterbacks, this is probably one of the youngest quarterback rooms in the league. You with Jordan Love, Sean Clifford, and Michael Pratt. The coach has taken it upon himself to kind of bring these young quarterbacks along with Tom Clements. And I just want to talk about that dynamic because they didn't sign a veteran to back up Jordan Love. They basically drafted Sean Clifford out of Penn State and said, we're going to roll with these young guys.
Yeah, and then to Michael Pratt. I think when you're talking about Clifford and Pratt, you're talking about guys they're trying to develop. And not necessarily to start for them, but to start for someone else. And maybe it's kind of like what Ron Wolf did in the 90s. drafting Matt Hasselbeck and that type of thing. You draft these guys late, you develop them over the course of 3-4 years, and then you make a play, to get it for another draft pick maybe. Maybe they're part of a deal that brings a veteran player to your football team, that type of thing. But they like these two guys for a couple of reasons. Sean Clifford, number one, he's a gamer type, okay? All these guys, it's amazing today that people who cover teams have to write about practice like it's a game.
Yeah.
And, analyze every throw and route. At one point, I said on Twitter to one of the guys, I said, he was going into great detail over this tremendous catch that was made in minicamp. I said, we're talking about practice here, right? Not a game, practice, okay? And so the Clifford's the kind of kid that he shows up in games, very resourceful, smart, understands defenses, that kind of thing. Michael Pratt's a guy who in 4 years at Tulane had 4 different offensive coordinators, played a lot of college football. They really like him. They got him in the 7th round. A lot of the draft experts had him middle rounds, like 4th, maybe 5th round. So they feel like they got value there. They have 2 quarterbacks, young guys, that they feel like they can develop. The veteran guy, Jim, that you mentioned, those teams that I guess are on the verge of the Super Bowl, if you look at them, they have a veteran in place, a guy who has started and won a couple of games in his NFL career. That's generally the case, but not all the time. Ted Thompson never had that under Aaron Rodgers, and there were a couple of times where it almost burned him. Like in 2013 when Rodgers went down, they tried a couple of quarterbacks they had on the roster. They had to go back and get Matt Flynn to save the season. So, it's interesting how that works. But I think when a front office feels like it's on the cusp of a Super Bowl, I'm not talking about the Packers now, but normally you got a veteran in there backing up your starter that you could win a couple of games with if your starter goes down.
Wayne Larrivee, our guest here on Bears Weekly on ESPN 1000 of the Bears Radio Network. Wayne, in your opinion, how impressive was it the Packers did what they did offensively as the season wore on with young receivers, first or rookie year players at all the skill position, receiving positions, including tight end? Yep. To me, I didn't see that coming, but boy, that was impressive. And who emerges as the number one guy out of that group, especially a wide receiver?
Yeah, good point. Who emerges? That's the thing that people are wondering about here. Christian Watson certainly could be that guy if he can stay healthy and stay on the field. Jaden Reed's got a great quality to him, kid out of Naperville, Illinois. Romeo Dobbs is a solid red zone, crafty receiver in the middle of the field. Bo Melton made some plays late in the season. Jeff, I got to tell you, I was shocked as well watching the development of that team. They start out 2-1. They won that opener in Chicago. They feel pretty good about themselves at 2-1. And then they go into a 4-game losing streak. They're the youngest team in the league. They don't win a game for 42 days. I'm saying to myself, I've seen some bad teams, Kansas City, even the Wanstead years in Chicago. Especially young teams, they go into the tank when they lose 4 in a row. They haven't won in over a month. But that team, I think, and I talked to LaFleur about this briefly because he only talks to me briefly. But typical head coach, play-by-play guy. The head coach is going to give you maybe a minute. But I talked to him on the way into practice one time, and I said, it's amazing what happened down the stretch. He said, I think the fact that those young guys had no idea what they were supposed to do, they just showed up and kept playing. And they got better. And when the guys around Jordan Love got better, he got better, and they built some momentum. They had very good chemistry, those young guys. And, now there's a belief that they can do this. And they proved it down the stretch in the last 6 games of the regular season, last 8 games of the season itself. They accomplished a lot, and they feel like they're a team on the rise. They don't really care what the outside is thinking. Their expectations inside that locker room have changed this year.
Hey, Wayne, I was a big fan of Aaron Jones. I think he's a great player, but I don't know about the Green Bay running game now. Do you guys know enough about it? Do the coaches know enough about it? Because it seems like when you have a guy like Aaron Jones, you know how he's going to fit in your offense. When you have a new running back, do they know exactly what your running game is going to look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they gained that in this spring and during the mini camp. Josh Jacobs spent the whole offseason in Green Bay, and they gave him some time off at the minicamp. I think they know what they've got with this guy. He's not as dynamic as, Aaron Jones could be, but he's probably a little more durable. In 5 years, he's missed 10 games, 4 of which came last year. He didn't have a good year in Las Vegas last year, but you know what? He missed the last 4 games, rushed for over 800 yards. They feel like they've got a workhorse kind of running back in Josh Jacobs. Now, they retained A.J. Dillon, and then they drafted Marshawn Lloyd. Lloyd is the guy who might be able to give them that big play dimension if Jacobs doesn't. But Jacobs, 2 years ago, when he led the league in rushing, he led the league in 10-plus yard runs, I believe, with 41 that year.
Final one for me, Wayne, is about your special teams coach, Rich Bisaccia. Obviously, with the new kickoff rule, I don't know, can you glean anything on what your discussions with Bisaccia and how they're going to attack this new rule?
They did a lot of work and experience, tried to get some experience in that regard, lining up and that kind of thing. Couldn't really tell a whole lot, Jim, from the mini camp or even the OTAs as to how they're going to approach this. It's going to be very interesting. I've been going over that rule, and there's so many different things that can happen. Okay, the kickoff lands in the landing zone, you got to return it. If it hits in the landing zone into the end zone and you don't return it, where does the ball come out? It comes out, I guess, to the 30-yard line, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of things going on with this rule. They feel like Keyshawn Nixon, who's kind of built like a running back, and maybe it's a running back type of thing that you're going to need with this, because as you've got everybody in the receiving zone except for the kicker. Everybody's right there. And so you maybe need more of a running back type mentality on that return. But it's going to be very interesting to see what teams do and how they work that. But needless to say, I think it's going to have I don't know what you guys think, it's going to have a major impact on offense in this league, because I think in many respects you might be seeing teams come out with much better field position on average than they did off a football kickoff return of a year ago.
Yeah, no more bathroom breaks or coffee breaks for fans. You gotta watch. No way, no how. It's going to be fun to watch. Wayne, appreciate the time as always. We'll see you soon.
All right, guys, take care.
That's Wayne Larrivee. Coming up next, Dan Miller of the Detroit Lions Radio Network. That's next on Bears Weekly on ESPN 1000 and the Bears Radio Network.
This is Bears Weekly with the voice of the Bears for 23 years, Jeff Joniak, on the Bears Radio Network.
This segment of Bears Weekly is brought to you by CDW, People Who Get It, Jeff and Tom and Jim Miller from SiriusXM NFL Radio, and our good friend Dan Miller, the voice of the Detroit Lions, a playoff team, Super Bowl contender a year ago, and a favorite to contend again for the Super Bowl here in 2024. Big Dan, how you feeling? And I see that big lion in the background. We're on Zoom, fans, so we could see that roaring lion. The roar is definitely restored in Detroit.
Yeah, it feels good. You know what? It was a fun season. It was something these fans had never been able to enjoy, which was a playoff game at Ford Field, and then to win 2 playoff games at Ford Field to get to the NFC Championship game. Obviously a disappointment there, but it's something to build on. And I think that's probably the biggest key, guys, is we're dealing with something that we haven't dealt with here before, and that's watching this team try to build on success. You got to start all over again, do it all again, have some luck with injuries, execute, win, things like that. So, really it is – I look at this team. It's a really talented team. I think they're really good on paper, but now it's go out and prove it on the field again.
Dan, when you look at sustained success for a football team, to me, because I'm an ex-offensive lineman, I think it starts with the consistency at the offensive line. You guys invested some big money in the offseason, and you got that group back. How important is that group specifically to the swagger of the locker room?
Thomas, everything. It's everything. And I've said this before. It's like when you're in high school and you walk into a party with the baddest dude in the world and nobody's messing with you. That's what they feel like when they walk on the field with this offensive line. I mean, they just feel like that group, that is the face of the team. You can talk about other guys, and there's other terrific players on this team, but that group collectively is the face of this team. It's the engine at which makes them go. It gives them confidence. It gives them a running game. It gives them time for Jared Goff to do what he does. They've put a lot of assets into it. There's 3 number 1 picks there. an all-pro they signed from Baltimore and Zeitler this past offseason, and a former third-round pick who went to Denver and came back. So this isn't by accident. This is something that they wanted to build around. But your point is dead on, because this is what makes them go. That's what gives them confidence every week that they can control the line of scrimmage.
Dan, Jim Miller here. Always good to talk to you.
Hey.
The perception of Jared Goff when the trade was going down, and then the perception now of Jared Goff, because I think it was midway through the season that Dan Campbell in that post-game press conference said, Jared Goff, you've earned the right to be the quarterback of the Detroit Lions. Just the perception of Goff.
No doubt, Jim. Good to talk to you. It's look, when he was brought over from the Rams, I think there was a feeling in Detroit like, okay, you traded Stafford, you're going to start over again now. And he was going to be, and this word's been used a lot, and now it's kind of laughed at here in Detroit, a bridge quarterback. But the one guy that absolutely didn't think he was a bridge quarterback was Brad Holmes, who was the guy that was drafting him in Los Angeles before they, fell out of favor there and came to Detroit. So he always believed that he could be the starting quarterback. Now, he had to prove it. He had to show that he was still the guy that helped the Rams get to the Super Bowl. But look, I think in Detroit, there were no huge expectations under any circumstances that Jared Goff was going to be this guy, this good when they traded Matthew Stafford. I think it was more about trading Stafford, starting over, getting a first-round pick, and then the feeling was, you got a second first-round pick because you took on Jared Goff's contract. But I think this organization always had faith in him that if they surrounded him with the right people, he could be the guy. And I think he's proven to this point that that is the case. So, yeah, the perception has absolutely changed. You heard it before the Rams game last year in the playoffs, where these fans 90 minutes before the game are chanting Jared Goff. They're doing it in grocery stores. They're doing it at Wings games. They're doing it at Pistons games. It's unbelievable just the way this guy has kind of adopted Detroit, and they've adopted him.
Yeah, that bridge, Dan Miller, our guest here on Bears Weekly on ESPN 1000 of the Bears Radio Network, that bridge has been reconstructed towards, higher aspirations, that's for sure, a possible Super Bowl for the Detroit Lions. I'm going to save Hard Knocks for Tom. Tom's intrigued by this Hard Knocks, so I know he's got a Hard Knocks question. I'm sure he does, because you guys have lived it. But what is the most pressing issue from your perspective for the Lions as they enter training camp?
I think it's what can that defensive line do? How much improvement can they make in terms of making quarterbacks uncomfortable? They've flipped that whole secondary. It's going to the cornerback room looks completely different. Safety's probably going to look different because Brian Branch is going to get a lot of time back there. They went out and got Carl Davis, went out and got Amik Robertson. First two draft picks were corners. So those guys, I think, especially some of those young guys, two of those rookies, are going to be playing their way into it. But what can help them is the defensive line. We know who Aiden Hutchinson is. We know who Aleem McNeil is. They signed DJ Reader. He's probably going to be a late start here. He's coming off an injury. I don't think he'll be ready to go at the beginning of camp. He might be pushing the beginning of the regular season before he's ready to go. So it's a question of who else can get it done. They signed Marcus Davenport. Look, he hasn't played particularly well in his NFL career, but you got coaches here that were with him in New Orleans that believe that they can get something out of him. James Houston is back and healthy again. So there's a number of guys that are candidates. They've got two second-round draft picks, that haven't played particularly well over time in Onwuzurike and Pascal. Those guys are going to get another opportunity. But, Jeff, to me, they haven't made quarterbacks uncomfortable very often outside of Hutchinson. They've got to do that. That can really be the missing piece on that defense and lift everybody else up.
Dan Campbell is the most Ditka-like head coach that I've ever seen after playing for Ditka. Can you appreciate the fact that he doesn't hide from the cameras, that he shows his emotion, and then he shows the leadership type traits to his job that he has?
Yeah, he's been the exact guy that this franchise and this city needed, literally from the moment he walked in the door, from his opening press conference that everybody's already talked a lot about. He is who he is. He's exactly the same guy when he's standing at the podium as if you were standing in the corner drinking a beer with him, just, shooting the bull. He doesn't change. And I think that's what players appreciate about him. He gives you exactly what you deserve. You know where you stand with him. There's just a people quality about him that resonates with players and it resonates with people. He just, you leave a conversation with him and you think that's a good dude. Now, look, he's serious. He is intense. He is driven. But the core of it all is this is a good guy who's a good leader who players want to play for. You've seen that here in Detroit. And I think it's been a big part of what's allowed this team to kind of take off and endure the tough times early. Because, look, when they were 3-13-1 and then 1-6 to start the next season, you know, some of Dan Campbell's equity that he had bought was helping him there because there were some questions about, man, is this the right guy? But certainly he has proven after that he is.
Let me follow up with that, Dan, because he's been aggressive for this team to win, you know, going for it on fourth down in situations, and some would even say even in the championship game, you know, how aggressive he was. Do you think he'll grow as a coach? You know, now that he knows he's probably got a more talented team, will he be as aggressive as he's been going into this year?
I think inherent in that question, Jim, is whether or not that requires growth, because that would indicate that you disagree with what he did. And I understand that all that's up for argument. I don't know that he feels that way. I don't know that he necessarily feels that coaching the other way would be growth or that it would be him maturing as a coach or anything like that. I think this is the way he wants to play it. His best unit on this team is his offense, and it's one that he trusts the most. Look, were there times where I thought they should have gone for 3 points? Yeah, there were. But there were other times as well. You can look at a fourth down against the Rams touchdown, fourth down against the Bucs touchdown in the playoffs, where if they don't make it, he probably gets criticized. They did make it, and it's like, all right, touchdown, and there's not a lot of talk about it afterwards. There's talk about the misses, but there have been some big moments where he's been able to do that, roll the dice. Opening game at Kansas City last year, fourth down, fake punt inside your own 20. So, I mean, yeah, he's different than other guys. I don't know if he's going to change, because I think that's in part who he is. If they get a little more consistency, maybe and a little more trust in the field goal game, maybe that changes some thoughts. They've got Jake Bates, the kid who blew up the UFL this past season, and we'll see if he can come in and win a job against Badgley. But I think it's something we're all going to find out together. But I will say this, Jim, I do think he's extremely comfortable in the decisions that he makes, and I don't think that they're necessarily ones that he looks back on and has great regret for. So I'm going to learn as you learn as we watch this thing unfold. But in my conversations with him, I've just grown to believe that that's who he is.
Final moments with Dan Miller. Dan, Tom doesn't have time to give this question. So what are we bracing for our first go around with Hard Knocks?
You know what, guys? I went into this, and I will tell you the organization for years avoided that. They made it clear they didn't want anything to do with it, as I know a lot of teams have. And when they got here, I will tell you it was really cool. And the people that are there from NFL Films and Hard Knocks are phenomenal at their jobs. You don't even know they're there. I'll tell a quick story. We were recording a training camp special the first day of training camp when they were there, and somebody sent me a picture afterwards. And there were two Hard Knocks guys like laying on their bellies, somebody else with a boom mic hanging over the top. I never knew they were there. I mean, these guys just understand how to stay out of the way. The content is terrific. I think your fans are going to love every Tuesday night watching the show. I think you guys will enjoy watching this show every Tuesday night. We got to see things that we never got to see before. So going in, I thought it would be intrusive. I wasn't comfortable with it. And I don't know how the organization, this regime felt, because I think this time they kind of sought it out and said, heck, let's do it. In the end, I think it was a huge, huge plus for Detroit, because people saw Dan Campbell and what he is, Brad Holmes and what he is, and this organization and how it had changed, and changed a lot of the ways that people had thought of the Detroit Lions before. So I got nothing but good things to say about it.
Good stuff. We'll be looking forward to that and seeing you not until Thanksgiving. So it's a late start for the division for the Bears this year.
We'll jam in two over the holidays, though, so that'll be nice.
Yes. All right, Big Dan Miller, appreciate your time. We will talk to you soon. Thanks for joining us. Let's take our final break, and we'll rejoin Jim and Tom after this break on ESPN 1000 of the Bears Radio Network.
This is Bears Weekly with the voice of the Bears for 23 years, Jeff Joniak, on the Bears Radio Network.
Call it all, Bears fans. Want unforgettable access to see the Chicago Bears play at Soldier Field this season? VIP official ticket packages now available for every home game. Unlock access to exclusive ticket packages that may include entry to in-stadium hospitality lounges, pregame sideline credentials, and the Chicago City Pass. Visit ChicagoBearsVIP.com or call 866-202-5755 for more info. Again, that's ChicagoBearsVIP.com or call 866-202-5755. Don't miss this exclusive opportunity with Chicago Bears VIP. Down to our final stretch of Bears Weekly this week. Tom heard a lot of great things about the NFC North, but let's shift it back to the Bears here as they fit in the division. Just ham and egging it here. Toughest defensive coordinator to the three that the Bears are going to face here in 2024 in the division that they have to decodify, so to speak.
Well, the attacking ability of the Minnesota defensive coordinator, Flores. When you talk about is he facing an offensive line that has some deficiencies with the first-year starting quarterback? Now, if you're going to try to take advantage of that and you put the offensive line in the worst position possible when you play in Minnesota and you have it, to me is my biggest concern. I think when I look at what that defensive coordinator is willing to do to young, inexperienced quarterbacks, and listen, Caleb is going to be inexperienced until his second year. So I'm not saying anything disrespectful to the quarterback position. It's just one of the most difficult positions to master, and especially under the circumstances that he's going to see in the NFL his first year.
Yeah, for me, it's going to be Brian Flores because he provides a lot of different looks, a lot of different blitz packages. You got to know your pickups, things like that. So that can be challenging for a young quarterback because now, again, you don't have two-a-days. You're only doing walkthroughs. You're not doing things full speed and live, and how you're going to react to a certain blitz in order to get the timing down. So it's much more difficult. But I would think it's Flores of the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah.
Can I just say one thing, Jeff? Too is when you look at the schedule and you think of not starting the division games until week 10. There's going to be a lot of exposure to what Caleb is doing well and what he's not doing so well at the first time they start playing these division teams. So they're going to know a lot more about him. Caleb will know a lot more about himself, but you're still facing a guy that's going to have a lot of film to look at.
That's a great point. Yeah, I keep saying it's actually week 11. Week 11 is when the season starts.
Right.
I mean, that stretch is going to be nasty, and it's going to be fun, though. It's going to be fun to see how everybody grows together and who emerges out of that bunch. I mean, I already know what Keenan Allen and DJ Moore can do, but who's that next guy? Maybe it's a DeAndre Swift. Maybe it is a Rome Odunze. Maybe it's Gerald Everett in combination with Cole Kmet. Just so many options. Jim, I'm interested in see what kind of defense Jeff Hafley is going to call in Green Bay and how he's going to use some really good pieces there right now. And again, they reloaded in the secondary. They got linebacker depth, a little faster at the linebacker position now.
Yeah, when you look at Green Bay, I thought it was a good pick by them taking Edger and Cooper because he provides a lot of speed. He's a good off-the-ball linebacker, but they're going to an entirely different defense. They were a 3-4 defense. Now with Jeff Hafley there, they're going to be a 4-3 defense. At times they'll kick Lucas Van Ness inside. They'll have Rashawn Gary, obviously Preston Smith as their outside defensive ends. But coverage-wise, he'll mix up the coverages more than, say, the last defense coordinator who was there. Man, I'm blanking out on his Joe Barry, who was there previously. So he'll man up, say, Jair Alexander. So he'll go against DJ Moore. He'll line up. A lot of times with their last defensive coordinator, they didn't go straight man-to-man, and that's what Jair Alexander and a lot of secondary players were complaining about for the Green Bay Packers. So whole new defense, all new coverages, and there'll be a lot of different looks from Green Bay this year.
All right, let me ask you this. Did anybody see the Giants on HBO Hard Knocks, the offseason with the Giants? Have you seen any of those clips?
A little bit of that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Tom, I don't know if you can see that in your world of detachment from society. But there's some clips out there, the behind-the-scenes interviews with Rome Odunze and Caleb Williams. Takeaway was they were both very impressive, and the Giants, as many teams, were very intrigued by both. If you meet Rome Odunze, you're going to be impressed with the guy. There's no way you're not. He's mature, and that maturity showed in that interview with Joe Shane and Brian Dable and the New York Giants. And same with Caleb Williams. Tom, they had Caleb. If you had to take one snap, one play, your favorite pass play, and run it 70 times in the game despite the coverage, which one would it be? And he'd put it on the board. Dable's throwing a bunch of coverages at him. Boom, nailed it. It was impressive.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about it is when you have Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze and all the, kind of difficult interviews that they are facing, and kind of knowing, okay, I'm never going to get to this football team because I'm going to be one of the first guys picked in the draft in terms of Caleb Williams. So you kind of have to respect the fact that he pays attention and really understood and respected the interviews that he was going through, even though he knew realistically he wasn't going to get there. But my hope is that some of the Bears and some of the people that know those microphones are live, they kind of look at this Hard Knocks of the Giants and understand the scrutiny they could possibly be under, because what I've seen of the Giants is some of the comments that they weren't making behind the scenes because the microphones are in the room.
Yeah.
So just be aware when you're going through your same experience on Hard Knocks, the inside the building personnel.
Right. All right, fellas, we're out of time. That's going to do it for us. The executive producer of the Bears Radio Network is Eric Ostrowski. Thanks to our Bears producers, Dan Barilli and Jordan Tredup, and Kendra Smith in the studio. For Tom Thayer, Jim Miller, and all our guests tonight, thanks for listening. This has been Bears Weekly on the new radio home of the Chicago Bears, ESPN Chicago. Good night, everybody. Black and Abdallah are next.
Thank you for listening to the Chicago Bears Network presentation of Bears Weekly, hosted by the mayor of Bearsville, Jeff Joniak, and Surfmaster Tom Thayer. Podcasts are available on the Chicago Bears official app. Bears Weekly has been brought to you by Apple Podcasts, Bet Rivers, IGS Energy, and Miller Lite.